Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Way, a RUDIS wrestling podcast. This week we jumped into chapters 8 and 9 of the book, Make Your Bed. If you're just joining us, you can head over to therudis.com to catch up on previous episodes and our other podcast, as well as get resources for wrestling technique, coaching interviews, custom wrestling gear, and apparel, all at therudis.com. In addition to this episode, this week we had an exclusive interview with Yanni Diakomahalis, where he talks about his arbitration process for the world team and how he fell in love with the sport of wrestling. For those of you interested in new product listing, we launched our Miles Martin apparel line, and in case you didn't get a chance to pick them up at Fargo, you can shop for our state tees on our website, so head over to therudis.com to check these out. Thanks again for tuning into The Way, and we hope you enjoy this episode of Make Your Bed, Chapters 8 and 9, Rise to the Occasion.
Hey everyone, this is Cary with The Way, with my co-host Matt Dernlan, and we're covering the book right now, Make Your Bed. It's a 10-chapter book by a former Navy SEAL. Spent 20-some years in the SEALs and led SEALs in Afghanistan and various parts of the world, and was in charge of JSOC down in the Florida area. And so we've been making our way through his book and hitting these chapters. How you doing, Matt?
Good. We've had a brief sabbatical. We both had a bunch of things going on. I know you've been heavy into camps, and you just wrapped that up. We've been doing different things on our end. You know, with Fargo, we had a big opportunity out in Fargo last week, so we were busy doing that, and then just getting prepared for the World Championships and getting everything up and running for that. So finally glad to jump back on here and jump back into the book.
Yeah, it's been good, man. I was telling you the other day, I took my I don't know if I'd have made it as a frogman, or at least my son. I took my son camping the other night, and he had me in a rush. We live on the river, so we have a couple kayaks. So we'll take 3 kayaks. He'll take one, I'll take one, and then I'll tie the supply kayak, as we could call it, to my kayak, and we'll paddle up the river about 2 miles. And over the course of the years, there's been this flooding that has happened, so it's made this sand beach. And he's been excited because I've had camp and we've been busy, and so I got home from work. I wanted to get on the river before dark, and I was packing my bags, and in the process of packing the bags with the tent and the food and all that, I forgot the matches, man. So, we didn't listen. He was so mad at me and so upset at the same time. We paddled up there. We hadn't done it in a while, and we got up there and set up the tent, did everything, was all ready to camp. Chairs were set, and I start digging through my bag, and I can't find it, man. And he's like, "What happened, Dad?" I said, "Well, basically what happened was I switched bags, and the matches were in the one bag, and I pulled everything across except the matches." And so he was, our phones get access, so he was researching how to make fire with your headlamp and everything else. But needless to say, we did not have fire. And at some point, he's like, "Well, let's just go to bed." And then at like 11 o'clock at night, we were like, let's just jump in the kayaks and head back, and we'll have my wife pick us up in the Jeep and we'll throw them in. So it was fun though. We still had a great time, getting to spend time with him, but we kayaked back at like 11 o'clock on our river, and, heard the coyotes and the animals and stuff. So it was pretty cool, but yeah, I don't know if we'd have made it as the frogman.
So how long was that? How long is the trek upriver to the island?
Well, it's not a real tough current on the way up, and he's slow, so I'm always waiting on him. In fact, he capsized his kayak because he was trying to grab the kayak that I was pulling, and he was going to have me pull him up the river, but he did this without without telling me. He was trying to sneak a ride, and he wound up capsizing. So we had to drift ashore and get all the water out of his boat. So it takes us it's probably about an hour and a half to paddle up. We take our time, and then coming back, we're with the current. So it's just flying on the way back. It takes about 45 minutes.
So insult to injury, he was drenched. He was wet out in the middle of nowhere.
Oh, yeah. Yes. And we're really not out in the middle of nowhere, though, because like on the river, there's some homes and stuff. So he wanted my wife to drive us and bring matches, but where we're at, we couldn't, So I'm like,
Yeah.
we'll just tough it out. And then eventually we just wound up going home because he wanted to go home. So the kayak back in the middle of the night was a good time, but it's
Nice.
Good, man. I love getting outside. I don't get outside enough, but anyway,
I'm sure just getting away, just being with your son, had an opportunity, no matter if the circumstance is good or bad, just getting away, especially, with the intensity of camps and all that entails, and just probably getting away and being with him, just any opportunity to get away with him, I'm sure was nice.
Yeah. And we don't, you get caught up, recruiting is year round now and in training and just, there's so much stuff more with the job. And so it's gotten busier and busier over time, but anyway, so we're in, we're kind of, I think we combine chapters 8 and 9 here, Matt. There's, for those of you following along, you're going to get to the chapter and it deals a lot with the respect that these vets and these servicemen and some of these individuals who are killed in action. And he covers this in the book and I don't feel right covering it. And I know Matt doesn't, just because, we haven't lived that life. And I think it would be a disservice for us to try to sit there and say that we understand and the hardship. So just for that. So if you're following along, we're kind of just skimming over that and not really going to hit it just out of respect for these guys, because I think you feel the same way, Matt. We couldn't do it justice. We haven't served in the military, right?
No, without a doubt. I mean, when, even, for me, I think there's always a tendency, like before you go into a big match and you're talking to the team, like people always say, we're going into battle, we're going into war. It's like, nah, we're not really. I mean,
no.
There's a lot of relatable things. And I think for chapter 8 and 9, I think we'll pull out and talk about the general theme of the chapters, but to actually get into the realities and the true realities of war and the dangers that the dangers and the deaths that come from these things. I think it would be very disrespectful to relate the realities of war to wrestling, which is still a sport, and there's relatable things, but yeah, just from a respect factor, I wouldn't be comfortable talking about that as well.
And if you are, out there following, you are a veteran, hey, we appreciate your service in everything you do. So, again, just out of respect, we're not going to really hit that topic because we haven't lived it. And I'm not going to pretend like I know it, and Matt's not either. But chapter 9, we start getting into the Hell Week, which is the big thing with the frogmen and the SEALs, right, Matt? That's the part where everybody who's not part of that community loves to talk about Hell Week, and we've hit it a little bit now, but this is that chapter he really starts to hit it a little bit. And he goes on to explain, which I've been told by some of my friends who are SEALs, that's what Hell Week is designed to do, is to get rid of the weak right away. It's not an organization where they have time to spend millions of dollars training you and prepping you and taking the SEAL leaders who are training these guys to take time away from the group. And so Hell Week is basically 6 days with no sleep, tons of calisthenics and tons of, boat maneuvers and running and all that, all the things that go along with the training. And he talks about it here, and that's the get rid of the week. And this has always been something that's fascinated people, I think. And, what I like to get back to is telling people this is the part of wrestling where you can kind of relate with the terms of the career, because BUD/S is actually 6 months long. It's not this one climactic, at the end, we're going to hit this 6 days of no sleep. That actually happens early on. When I talk to my friends, they've always said that Cary, that's really not that hard. If you're a tough guy and you have a high threshold for pain and mental toughness, he says you'll get through Hell Week. He goes, it's the 6 months. It's the 6 months of being wet, cold, and sandy. He goes, that's the part that's really hard. And when you step back and you think of it that way, yeah, that is 6 months, wet, cold, and sandy, running everywhere you go. You've got to be a pretty mentally tough individual to sustain that and go through the training. Plus you have these guys on your butt the whole time. And to some extent, these guys are trying to help you get through it. But at the same time, they're also trying to really put pressure on you to see if they can crack you in a tough situation, because you won't know what you'll face in combat someday. And so 6 months of a guy screaming at you, wet, cold, and sandy, sure doesn't sound like fun to me. How about you, Matt?
No, not at all. And I think that's, a lot of things that we try and simulate certain things to that. You have to make sure when guys join your program, I know that, we talk about that period of adjustment, and everybody going from high school into college. I don't care how talented you are, how successful you've been. That first experience in the college room is overwhelming to a lot of athletes. But I think it's your job as a coach, and my job in my past experience. Like, you have to paint a stark reality and a realistic reality of this is what the next 5 years is going to be. And we need to throw you into that right away, because if we don't do that, if we just kind of ease you into the situation or guide you or hold your hand, we're really not protecting you. And not only are we aren't protecting or preparing the individual properly, but you're not preparing your team. And, I that was one of the big things out of chapter 9 is, how the power of one person can inspire a whole group. And, everybody gets to that point. I know, I would always tell my guys, like, hey, if there wasn't a point in these 5 years where you questioned or wanted to quit this experience in wrestling, it's like, I would call you a liar, because it's just that difficult. And everybody's going to run into those points and times where they question things. Is this really worth it? Is what I'm putting into this sport really worth it? Am I going to get out of it what I'm putting back in? And so it's normal. And I would tell my guys this all the time. That's normal for you to experience those things. So don't think something's wrong with you, or, you don't have a passion or motivation for this sport. This is a normal feeling. And in those points and times, you need those other individuals around you to help pick you up, because we're all going to face those moments of crisis and moments of weakness. And, I think that's, when they were talking about when you're neck deep in mud, and the power of bringing guys together, and they were talking about, the drill instructor was on these guys, just quit, come out of the mud. We got coffee, we got soup, we've got all these comforts, that could take you away from, the pain and the mental anguish that you're feeling. But this is where it's critical for your teammates to lift you up at certain points in time.
Right. Well, this is, and in this chapter, there's a key phrase, and he says, there's a part where he says, "Be the change," and he talks about how one individual can start that change, and when you hit that part about they're in Hell Week and they're sitting in the mud, and the guy the drill instructors are sitting there having coffee and sitting around a warm fire, and these guys are freezing. And he starts taunting that guy to quit, and the one guy decides he's going to quit. And as he's walking, to that bell, somebody starts. I think they started singing, and that's pretty. I guess that's a pretty big thing in obviously in terms of being in the military with your marching and things like that. Whether you're doing their cadences, they started singing, and the one guy grabbed him by the arm, and he pulled that guy back in, and they all kind of locked arms and started singing. And that's the big part of this, how one individual can start making a change, and you want to have that leadership. And we both know, you coached at Binghamton. I coached here at Campbell, and we've said it a million times. Programs like that, those mid-major programs, one person can change your program. One guy, getting on the stand or becoming a national champion can literally turn your program around and get it going in the right direction. And every coach, at the Division I level will tell you, when you have one of those programs, that's what you're out there searching for all the time. And I tell people all the time that, and it's just like this, and because this was said to me, like, they don't make Navy SEALs. They say, you go and find those guys. You find guys who are willing to do this kind of job and go through this 6 months of training. He's like, we don't make people become a Navy SEAL. We find them, and I feel the same way for the most part about winning a national title. Like, you go out and you find the guys who truly want to be a national champion and who are already starting to push themselves and sacrifice and are disciplined on and off the mat to hit that level of success. And then your only job is to most part is be the drill instructor. and keep tweaking and honing their skills and getting things right. That's really what we do. And, you know, I felt like that in my career. That's really what it was. Like I was on the path to be a national champion. And then I was lucky enough and fortunate enough to have certain guys come into my life and make corrections that I could learn from it. And they were just tweaking me along the way. And that's really what we're doing. You know, I know that's what I'm doing here. I don't know how you were at Binghamton, but I'm out there trying to find that guy all the time. And that's what my staff's trying to do.
Yeah, because, you know, and we've talked about this in the past too, like talent's the obvious thing to target, right? It's the easiest thing in coaching at the highest level when you're recruiting. Like talent's obvious, right? And that's kind of the prerequisite to wrestle at the highest level. But then really, you know, the job in recruiting is, okay, I've found the talent. Now it's my job to really dig in and see really how tough this guy is. You know, is he really motivated? Because it's an easy thing to say, yeah, coach, I want to win a national title. But it's very, very rare to find that individual that's willing to sacrifice and do all the little things, you know, and persevere and commit in all the little things to actually make that a reality. And I know on the flip side, as you were talking, you know, once you can find that one guy and that one guy that can kick the door down and and what that does to elevate and inspire those around them, their level of belief. On the flip side, and I think they talked about that in the chapter, how the drill instructor would smile once that first person broke away from the group, climbed out of the mud, sat by the fire to get their coffee. Then he knew once that first guy does it, you're going to see a bunch of other guys come through. And I would always tell my coaches, you know, you would have that first guy come through and say, hey, coach, I'm going to hang it up. This isn't for me. I would always tell my coach, like, hey, guys, we got to be really vigilant and prepared because there's a bunch of other guys thinking the same thing that this guy did, but they didn't want to be that first guy. But once that first guy opens the door and says, this isn't for me, you know, you always see like 3, 4, 5 guys like, how quickly can I stop the bleeding here, you know, and galvanize the group to come back together. I'm like, hey, no, fight the change. Fight and resist that urge to say this isn't for me, because he said at the beginning of the chapter, like, if you quit, you will regret this for the rest of your life. However you want to rationalize it, you know, you can't lie to yourself. You know, you will regret this decision for the rest of your life.
Right. Well, this goes back in you know, there is a phase. Look, if you're out there listening to this and you're a coach or a parent, there's a phase when we start our training that we do ramp it up really hard, because honestly, I don't want to spend time with the guy who's just, you know, trying to figure out whether he wants to wrestle Division I or not. My staff doesn't either. So there is a phase where we're like, if these guys are going to go, they're going to go. And we don't, for us to sit there in a month in to try to coax a guy to stick with it, man, not at a month in. You know, if somebody's already starting to waver, a lot of times they're mostly going to lose it. Not that we don't try, but there is a phase. But I will tell you, like the drill instructor said here, once the first guy goes, multiple will follow. There's always the same pattern. When I see guys leave the team, and when they leave the team, I'll notice that it'll be maybe a couple weeks, somebody else will leave the team. And when I start to recognize that, what happens is those are the guys always hanging out with each other. You know, like they say, misery loves company. And it's funny. Oh, my roommate went, now I'm going to go. This one guy in my apartment went, and then you see that apartment start to fall. So, you know, we always tell them, get a new roommate, get a new situation, you know, break away, because you're going to be doing stuff that guy's not doing. And every time you see him over there eating his bag of potato chips and not having to get up at 6:30 and go run or swim or do whatever it is, it's going to make it hard for you. And this is where we say you're always under attack. You're always mentally under attack is how I look at things. So who you surround yourself with, which is a speech everybody's heard since the beginning of time, show me your 5 friends and I'll show you who you are. You know, if you want to be a national champion or wrestle at the Division I level and be an All-American, show me the guys you're hanging out with and who you're training with, and I'll know whether you're serious or not. And that's exactly what happens here at Buds. You know, one guy goes, multiple will follow. It's the same on a wrestling team. It's hard. It's not easy. One guy goes, you better change your surroundings. If that's your roommate or the guy you're roommate in the apartment with, you need to get out of there and get a new situation, new living situation, and make sure you're with the right people.
Yeah, without a doubt. And for me, I don't know what your position was, but I never had success. I tried early on in my career to once that an individual would come into my office and say, "Hey, coach, I'm quitting." Early on, I would try and talk him out of that. I'm like, "Hey, I think this is a wrong decision." But for me, it was, if this guy got to the point where he can actually look me in the eye, knock on my door, come into my office and look me in the eye and say, "Hey, coach, I'm done," he's probably done. I don't know if you've what your thoughts are on that, but it's almost to that point. It's like, hey, you're not doing the team favor, and this is where you kind of got to look at troop welfare. Is once that first individual comes to you, they're probably out, and if you try and talk them back in, eventually they could actually be that rotten apple that's actually going to suck other people down. So as much as you want to save that individual and keep him part, and he's going to regret it, and you point that out, it's like, hey, so-and-so, I know where you're at, and I know once you come into my office, your mind's pretty much made up. It's probably not best for the group to actually convince him to rejoin the team and keep going. I don't know what your thoughts are about that, but that's been my experience. Yeah.
Exactly the same, because I made that mistake. I made that mistake, a couple times when I first got here. But my situation was a little different. My first year was 5 forfeits, and I was trying to build a team. And also, when you're building a team, you're looking at, who can we put in the lineup that can get it done, and then everybody needs training partners as well. And then you never know what guy is going to develop in that training partner situation where all of a sudden he's the guy. And so I made that mistake early on, and you're exactly right. We wound up getting a few rotten apples is what we did, and it hurt morale. And in the process, when you do that, you start to create a mediocre team. Now, my situation was a little different, and there were some times I had to do that. But now where we're at, where we've kind of established we're a healthy program, we're much more competitive than when we started, 5 years ago. So we're different. We're different. And so where you're at when that guy comes in, I can appreciate that, because, and my whole staff, that's because you're not wasting my time. Like, okay, this is too much for me. Hey, you gave it a go, at least you gave it a go, and you found out this is not for me. It's not the workload I want to do. The hard ones are the ones where you lose a guy after he's been here, 2 or 3 years. And that's rare. When somebody makes it 2 or 3 years, like, a discrepancy or an issue with the coach, maybe they transfer. But when you have a guy who just says, hey, I'm quitting after 2 to 3 years, and they played a part in your program, that's a little different. I've only run into that situation once, and I tried to work through that situation. And in the end, I wound up being angry because I wasted my time. The guy's mind was made up, like you're saying. But it was hard for me to fathom, when you've been with the program, 2 years, and you've been in the lineup, why you would just say I'm done. And it was just getting too much for him. The individual couldn't handle the stress of the competition, couldn't handle the stress of the room. The room was getting more stressful. Maintaining your spot was getting stressful. All these things just kind of, caused an implosion. And, but yeah, I agree. I respect the guy that comes in and says, I'm done. It's not a time waster. But yeah, that's what a lot about this is in Hell Week.
Yeah, because it's those guys, and I would talk to my guys a lot, and my coaches, because I was like you when I was at Binghamton at a mid-major. The reality is the coaches you get are probably young, and to put that into perspective, they would get. I know my young coaches would always get upset. I can't believe this guy is quitting. I can't believe that guy quit, or this and that. It's like, hey guys, I actually respect the guy that will come in and look me in the eye and say, hey coach, this isn't for me, because there's an equal number of guys that are kind of shortchanging the program because they're lying to themselves. They're lying to those around them. Like, yeah, I want this, when every indication by their effort, their performance, their lifestyle is saying, no, you don't want to do this, but you don't have the fortitude to actually say what's in your mind and your heart and your gut, and that's not for you. And so those guys that are half in and half out, are just doing the bare minimum to survive in the program. Those are the guys that I had more of a problem with. Those guys that actually came to me and said, hey coach, this isn't for me. I'm like, I'd shake their hand hey, good luck. If you ever need anything, I'm here for you. I recruited you. You know, you're still important to me, but I respect that you had, you know, the will and the fortitude to say, this isn't for me. I actually care about this team. I want to see it succeed. And if I continue to do this, I'm actually going to bring down what you're trying to accomplish. So almost all the guys that ever walked away and looked me in the eye and shook my hand, said, thank you for the opportunity. I still have a ton of respect for those guys.
Yeah, I do too. Well, look, Matt. Hey, man, it's been a good chat. Hey, I'm really looking forward to the last chapter. Last chapters I really enjoy. It's a little more personal for me, and I'll share some things next week. But hey, this is Matt and Cary on the way, and we'll talk to you all next week. And Matt, I'll talk to you next week, and have a good week. Okay, man.
Okay, take care, Cary.